And good evening. Welcome by the first Go Azure meetup by myself and Bram. It's very cool to finally do this meetup online. That's too bad, but hopefully in the future we can make hybrid events happening. So my name is Daniel Paulus. I work at Bright Blue and I do lots of things with Azure. And a few months ago, I was able to take over the Go Azure Meetup group, and I thought that was a great idea to get also into other parts of Azure. And thankfully, we have already found a great speaker. But let's first introduce Bram. Bram, you're still on mute, mate.
That's the common comment of the year, right? You're on mute. My name is Bram. I work at Wortel. I used to work with Daniel, and yeah, we're happy to blow some new air into this meetup and have some cool meetups for you guys. So thanks for joining.
Okay, so the first speaker that we have is Sven Malvik. He will be talking about APIM, so about API management. And it was actually a thing that I know that exists, but I've never actually worked with it. So let's get Sven online as well.
Hello.
Hi, Sven.
Hi, Daniel and Bram. Thanks for inviting me. Very nice. And you know, I run a meetup myself in Oslo, and I invited Bram some weeks ago. So I have to give back. So thanks very much.
Thanks for joining.
And it will be a long meetup, but if you have questions, just shoot them in the chat. I will take over that question and bring it to Sven. So I will break in his talk, and hopefully we can get a nice evening with lots of information. So I give the floor to Sven, and we will go out. Leave your questions in the chat.
Yeah, whenever we have questions, so please put them in the chat box and interrupt. Not me, but interrupt Daniel and Bram, and they will then come up, hopefully again, and now I'm alone, and then they will bring the questions forward. So I would like Bram to just put up the presentation, please. Thanks very much. I will start to talk a bit about Azure API Management at VIPS. That's where I work. And for those, I will talk about VIPS in a moment. It's just that you see where we come from with Azure API Management, because we also started with no knowledge of Azure API Management at all, but we had it in place. Then we will be a bit more practical, getting started. So go into the portal and then work with Azure API Management. And then when we have seen a bit about Azure API Management, we will talk about the core concepts. We have APIs, we have products, we have subscriptions, and we have groups and stuff like that, and how they are connected together and why this is important to know. And then we will talk about policies and named values. Policies is the most important part in Azure API Management, because they really let you change the behaviors of Azure API Management. And then we talk about networking. And when you have some more questions at the end, we have some minutes for FAQ as well, of course. So in 2000 so, by the way, all those sessions or mini agendas are about 50 minutes or so, not very long.
Sven, we can't really see your PowerPoint yet. We see your StreamYard window.
Oh, okay. Let me just stop and then share it again. But then I will just share Do you see it now?
Yes, we see it.
Okay. Yeah, that was it, the agenda that I went through. So in 2015, the DNB, which is Norway's largest bank, launched something called VIPS, where you basically, I will get to this very fast. It's basically a payment service where you can pay via the telephone number. You can pay small amounts of money to your friends, basically. Very easy, which is nice if you are on a soccer game, for example, and you want to buy a hot dog or something else. It's very handy to just have the phone and then just VIPs the people money. So it has become a verb called VIPs in Norway, to VIPs money, basically. And 1 year later, already 40% of all users or population in Norway use this, which is great. It has a 90% brand recognition in Norway, which is of course great as well. It's basically because of the immense of marketing campaign that we run. The last 3 years or so, VIPS was the most recognized brand also in Norway before Netflix and YouTube and stuff like that. So people like VIPS basically more than they like Netflix because it's very handy. Today, about 75% of the population use it, which is we about 5 million. 4 million are using VIPS, which is basically all the people besides maybe the children. So everybody has it. What is it? So you can basically pay people money. You can pay your invoices, all your invoices. You can go into a net store and log in with VIPS because it's also an identity provider, and then you can pay at the same time. And because everybody has it, it's very, very handy. You can pay, you can log in, you can use VIPS basically for everything, which makes it a very critical service in Norway. We have about 500,000 person-to-person transactions when we have the National Day, 17th of May. So we have really a spike at that day, which we have to handle also with Azure API Management. What's more important, more interesting is the basic architecture. We have the client apps, or it's just an app. But we have also partners, net stores, for example, e-commerce. They have to integrate with our services as well. And they use it through Azure API Management. So Azure API Management is really the facade, the entry point for all of our services. And beneath API Management, we have services. They might run on Kubernetes or app services, but they can also run on totally different services outside Azure as well. So it doesn't really matter if a backend service runs in Azure or in Google Cloud Service or Amazon, for example. Azure API Management integrates to all of them, and I will also show you this. But what's more interesting, because before we start to talk about how Azure API Management works and what it is, how we worked with it. Because when I started about 3 years ago with Azure API Management, I had really no knowledge of Azure API Management. And I came into VIPS, and so we had this Azure API Managed service, and we had one guy, which is basically, or he was responsible basically for the entire DevOps workflow, but also for API management. So whenever a person wanted to add a new API into Azure API Management, he had to go through this person and then onboard it on AKS. It was very hard, and it really was a bottleneck. And what we really needed to get rid of this bottleneck is, so that everybody can work with it, is that every team can work on API management and also AKS, of course. But this wasn't possible because nobody knew Azure API Management so well. it was for everybody basically a black box. So what we wanted to do in the first iteration really was that the teams were responsible for the AKS, but also responsible for their own APIs, so that they really are in control of their services. Let me just go to the API part. APIs are described as Swagger files, mostly today at least. And it really describes the API. But what we also need is the an application service file that describes the entire application, because an application is not only a service, it's also the API. Let me just hop over this one here. Sorry for that. When we started with Azure API Management, we had only one repository for all the APIs. So imagine you have, let's say you have 3 or 4 services, applications, and those applications have the backend code, but also have the Swagger file. So what you had to do when we started, and many really work in this way, is they create a separate repository for all the APIs, which then are uploaded to Azure API Management. So they treat basically Azure API Management as a monolith, which makes it then, of course, a black box, because you apply an API, a Swagger file, into a repository, and then somebody takes care of this repository to apply to Azure API Management. So you're basically, as a developer of the API, you do not know anything what happens after that. And that's, of course, a problem, because it's time consuming, because we are basically creating a bottleneck, and it's high risk, because what happens if something happened? The people working with Azure API Management doesn't know your API. So what we needed is that the teams take responsible themselves. What we did do basically is restructuring Azure API Management, or the APIM repository, basically. When you use, or we used Azure API Management as a monolith, as I said, and whenever there was a change in an API, as I said, we treated it as one monolith, as one application, and then we deployed this application to Azure API Management. So whenever there was a small change, we deployed the entire stack of all the APIs. And this is a problem. This is a huge problem, because imagine that you have a problem in Azure API Management. There's some bug in an API. What do you usually do when you don't know Azure API Management? You go into the portal, and then you look around, and then you see some error, and then you fix it. And then you are happy because it works. But the code is different still. You need to apply the change also in the code, of course. But you're not responsible for the code really in Azure API Management. So that happens to us. Changes were made in the portal, but not in the code. And when you have a production system and a test system, and maybe another system where Azure API Management is, you have 3 different states. And that's what happened to us. So I came into the team, into the, call it DevOps team or the cloud team, and were suddenly responsible for Azure API Management. And we had to make a change or a deployment, but we couldn't really make a deployment because the production environment looked different than the code, and we didn't know what really happens. So what was very important to us to make a change, that you do not treat API management as a monolith, but that you really can deploy one API in separate. So what we did, we got rid of this API management repository, and then we moved those applications, those APIs, those Swagger files back into the repositories for the applications. And then we could deploy directly from the application or from the pipeline for the application into API management. So every team basically could do it on themselves. Here's, for example, one API repository that how it looked like at our place. And we go into the details of Azure API Management very soon. Here we have two APIs, payments and invoice, in one repository. And then you have a team, a DevOps team maybe, that is responsible for this repository, but they do not know about payments or invoices, but they have to deploy it. So what we did, we split it up, or we moved basically those code for payments and invoice back to the repositories like this. What's here important, and I really want to very, very shortly dive into this here. If we see an example of payments, for example, we have an ARM template, and we have a policy, and we have the API, the JSON. We are actually just interested in the JSON, in the Swagger file, because that's what we know. What we will learn about a little bit later is the policy itself for Azure API Management, because as I said, it really lets you change the behavior of those APIs. But the ARM template is something that we don't want to use, because ARM templates are very verbose, basically. If you can see here an ARM template, there are really just three informations that we want to spend time on, and this is the name of the API, where the API is located, and the context path, basically. All the rest is just stuff that's totally irrelevant. What we did basically, we used a bunch of PowerShell code instead of applying the repository directly to Azure API Management. What I will show later, we used PowerShell, which has a great module for Azure API Management and which is very, very easy to use. So that was how we worked with Azure API Management, how we started, going from a centralized approach to a decentralized approach. If it's okay, I will tell about we dive into the Azure portal directly, create an instance, and just apply an API and play around a bit. Let me just stop this here. But Bram or Daniel, are there maybe any questions?
Up to this point, there are no questions in the chat anyway. So if people have questions, please put them in the chat. We will make sure to ask them to Sven. Don't hold back on the questions. Keep them coming.
Okay, great. Let me just go to here. And if you can share my screen. You've probably done this now.
Yeah.
So I created or sorry?
Can you zoom in a bit? It's not very sharp on the internet.
It's not. Can I make it larger? Like, let me just. Do you see it better now?
That's great. Yeah, it's awesome.
Okay. So I know that a lot of you haven't worked with Azure API Management because. Let me just update this here. Go to all services here. So when we choose here APIM services here, and then we can say create. Wait a moment. And I have a special subscription. As you know from Azure, you choose your resource group and then your region and so on. And then you have a pricing tier, which is kind of interesting. You have a developer, basic, standard, premium, and consumption. If you just play around with it and wanted to get it up to speed immediately, use the consumption, because it doesn't cost almost anything. You just pay per request from after 1,000 or 100,000 requests or so, and then it's super cheap. So it basically costs nothing. If you chose a developer, it costs immediately money, and you can't stop it. So you pay a fixed price for this, and it takes about 45 minutes to provision. And this is true for all those here. The premium tier is super expensive. I'm not sure about the exact price, but some $1,000, something like that. But the premium and the developer are quite interesting network-wise, because they let it put Azure API Management into a VNet, and you can't do this with basic and standard and consumption. And if you want to have VNet integration, because you are you like a more isolated instance, then you have to go with this. So at VIPS, we use only premium, which is super expensive, of course, but it's important. But when I'm just playing around, I use the consumption and sometimes developer. With the developer tier, you have a lot more features than you have with consumption. Consumption is really a bit limited, and I will show you this a bit later. I already created a developer tier here, and this doesn't have anything basically. It's a developer tier, but I didn't integrate it into a VNet yet. So it's basically open public to the internet. But we talk about networking a bit later. So I can go to APIs here. And remember, it's just get started here, just that you see how it works. And by default, I have an Echo API that I can use. But if I want to have something else, let's just conference API, just deploy a totally new API here. Here's the conference API. That's just an example of an API. And let's just integrate it. I can create a blank one or VSDL or SOAP or something, but right now I go for the Swagger or for Open API. And I just paste in the link here. And that says display name and and I give it a context path here. So this would be my link at the end. And then I say create, and then it takes 10 seconds or so, and it's uploaded. The backend service, the conference API, runs somewhere in a different Azure tenant hosted by Microsoft, and it's a static web app or web. I'm not sure, something like that. So if I want to test it, I can go here, or first of all, I have all my operations, my endpoints here. And let's, for example, say I want to test it with get topics. I can do so. I can go to test here. And then I can, below here, just send a request. And we see that I get my response back. So this has worked. So what I can do now is, sorry for that, I can test that directly from my terminal as well. like here, I posted, I can use curl, and this won't work. This won't work because I do not have, I'm not authorized. It requires here a subscription key that I have to provide. But what I also can say, I can go to settings up here, and I just want to test it if it works. So I won't require a subscription key here. And I can save, and then it will work. Sorry for that. No, it won't work. Oh, it works. Take some time. So we'll talk about subscription keys in a moment. But just one important thing here. This subscription key, what I will use through this test test pane here is a master subscription key. So whoever has the master subscription key can access any API that is deployed to Azure API Management. And you cannot delete this master API key, a subscription key. So when I send a request, or when I make this visible here, this subscription key cannot be deleted. And we had a security incident once, a long time ago, because people didn't know Azure API Management so well. And what they did, they took this subscription key and gave it to some partners, which is fine maybe for them, because they can use all APIs then. But maybe there are some APIs that they shouldn't use. Like you have a partner that shouldn't use the Echo API or payment API, and you give them the subscription key, and then suddenly they have access to everything. So never use this subscription key that you see here, but we'll talk about this in a moment. Yeah, let me just go back here. I have to make this a bit smaller. Can you see still? Is it large enough? I hope so. Then you have products where you can group basically APIs, and you have here the subscriptions, named values, which are basically properties that we can use in policies a bit later. Let me go back to this here. Sorry for this slide. I had to change it a bit, but I will explain it here. So how does Azure API Management work? So you have in the top, you have clients. That's your partners. That's application that can run on a phone, or it can be other services basically running on in Amazon or Google or whatever, or on-prem. And they will contact or send requests to your Azure API Management instance, which is the API facade. This Azure API Management can then send requests or forward your requests out to a service, to a backend that is running at Amazon or Google or on-prem, or they can send the request into another service which is running in your Azure tenant, which can be a virtual machine or it can be Kubernetes or so, and then the request can go out from there. So what Azure API Management really is doing, it can really unify all your APIs that you have. You have APIs on-prem in Google. You have maybe running Mercedes-Benz, for example. They have thousands of services, legacy service. They have data that is hidden, and that must maybe be made accessible again. But since they run an old SOAP service, which is maybe hard to integrate with, they integrated with Azure API Management. They added or deployed it basically to Azure API Management, and then you can use the REST API super easy with it. So Azure API Management is 3 parts. It's the portal that you just have seen. It's a developer portal, and it's a managed API gateway. The developer portal is something that I also would like to show you. The developer portal only comes with does not come with the consumption plan. So you have to spend a bit of money. Just can click here, and then the developer portal will very soon show up. And the developer portal is the entry point for your partners, basically everybody that would like to use your APIs. So this takes some minutes because I'm doing it the very first time. So here is the portal as an administrator. So that means I can change everything I want here. I can totally customize it. I can put another background, another colors. I can do something at a menu cards, or let me make it a bit shorter. I can everything basically. The first time I would like to do something, I have to publish it here. And this takes a moment then, but then it's available for all the users, where they basically can sign up and log in and choose their APIs that they want to use. And then we have the managed API gateway. The managed API gateway is really the API gateway, which is managed by Azure API Management. You can't do anything without it. Well, it's just there. So that means all your requests going to the managed API gateway will go to your instance. So that means if you have let's make a very absurd case. You have a client in Japan, for example, that calls a service in backend service also in Japan, but the Azure API Management instance is in Europe. So the request would basically go from Japan to Europe and back. So there's of course a lot of latency involved. But not only that, maybe there is a case where you really cannot send out the request out of your on-prem environment, because there are some regulations that says that request or the traffic has to stay within your environment. So you can't go out to Azure basically. Then you can't use the managed API gateway. And for that reason, Azure API Management has a self-hosted API gateway, which is basically a copy of the managed API gateway, which is a Docker image, and you can deploy it wherever you want, Kubernetes or whatever container environment you have, and use it. So the request would then go to this image, which might be on the same virtual machine, or maybe if you run Kubernetes, it will also be there. But we'll talk about networking a bit later. So what you can do with Azure API Management. I think the most interesting part here is unlocking digital assets. If you're running a large company, a large enterprise, and you have resources or legacy application that run somewhere with a totally old technology, and make those hidden treasures available again. And that you can really do with Azure API Management, because you can integrate with SOAP or VSDL, REST, and so on, which makes it a perfect service for those kinds of stuff. I think it's also, Azure API Management is also a great service if you think of having many partners. If you're just using it internally for 1 or 3 teams, I don't think it makes really sense. But if you have many services and many teams, then you can really unify all your APIs at one place. And that's how we use it in VIPS. We have about 100 APIs and about 15 teams or so. And I don't know how many thousand partners we have that use Azure API Management and integrate with us. So then it really makes sense. So what an enterprise API platform gives you, in a sense, is really a consistent documentation. So the documentation is the same for all the APIs. And that wouldn't be the case if you have 100 applications from 100 different teams. The documentation would look differently, basically, and you have a different environment and so on. But here you have it really, really consistent. The user onboarding, super important, is the same for the entire company through the developer portal. You have health monitoring at one place, or central place for that as well. And of course, governance and compliance, you can really do this from Azure API Management. Okay. Are there any questions, maybe? Or Daniel?
At this point, there are no questions in the chat.
Okay.
So I think everything you tell is clear. For me, it is anyway. But there is someone in the chat who says, I am looking into using this, and I love the meetups so far as you explained to them what your pitfalls were and what you do to make it better. So I think a question popping up.
Are you using APIM only for external facing APIs? No, not at all. We use it really for internal facing APIs and external. We are looking right now. I mean, there's always the question if you should use as an API gateway to reach your services, or should you go directly? And if you go directly, you need maybe some kind of service mesh and so on. But when you don't have this or don't want to use this, maybe APM is a good solution as well. It really depends on the size of the company, I would say. If you have a really large organization and the people are not talking to each other, it might make change. I mean, Mercedes, for example, I know they use it, and Zeiss, they use it, and many other large companies as well. That really makes sense because the teams do not work together, maybe different countries as well. So, yeah.
Then if he can use his own OAuth2 provider with the API gateway.
Yeah. I know that there is, or there was, the possibility at least to use Facebook and stuff like that, but it's deprecated now. I think it's just Azure AD, which is you can integrate with right now, or at least in the future.
Okay. Then we have another one. I see that you are using the keys to authenticate.
I really, those subscription keys, because I get the question sometimes with those subscription keys, I really would consider them as some sort of security at all. I don't think they are security. They are just a way to say that you are using this subscription or this API. You're allowed to use this API and not that API. But if you really would prevent a client from using a backend service, you should really do your own security in the backend as well. Because those subscription keys are not really we have made the experience that they get lost very soon, and you don't know what the clients are doing with those subscription keys. I mean, they do not secure them; they are only securing you. So
Yeah.
But
Okay.
this will get more clear a bit later.
Okay. Then there's one other one from Yako. So how do I make sure that an external party is not using my internal API?
How do you prevent the external user of an internal faced API? So first of all, what we have learned is that you make sure yourself that you secure your API self, but you can of course do this with policies, for example. First of all, with the subscription key, you can use it, of course, and prevent it, but you can also use those JWT tokens and within policies, which we will see later. Maybe
Okay.
I go just and talk maybe about the core concepts. Maybe just start with that one now.
Yeah, sure. I will drop out again and add your slide deck again.
Okay. So first of all, you have APIs that you have seen, and you have products. And those APIs have endpoints. And a product can have many APIs. So a product is really something where you want to group a couple of APIs. Maybe you have some a shopping service, for example, contains a payment API and a card API and maybe some more APIs, and you would group them as one product. And a user would like to subscribe to this product, and it can do it by getting a subscription for this product. This product then contains all the APIs. So what it means is a user gets a subscription, and through this subscription, it can call an API, basically. So if Ole Monson, for example, would like to use the conference API, he would subscribe to the conference product, because the conference product contains the conference API. And when he has the subscription, which basically describes a relation between a user and a product, then Ole Monson can call the conference API. So in a nutshell, there are many APIs. You can have hundreds of APIs in your instance, and then you can have I don't know if it's unlimited, but a lot of products as well, and they can contain 0 or all of the APIs or just a subset. And then you would subscribe basically to this product. So a product, in this case, the conference product would have a session API and a speaker API, and the administration service has the speaker API and the sales API. So if we take a look, for example, let me just go here. We have 2 APIs here, and then I have a product. Products, we have some default products already. The default products is for the I think for the guests, which just have the Echo API, and then you have one for the administrator as well. But let's just start very fresh and give it a name. Let's say, for example, the conference service, and we can give it a description here. I would publish it, and I want that people subscribe to this product. I can set a subscription count limit, and then I can add an API or many APIs. Okay, it doesn't work right now. Let's just refresh here. Go back here, and then I say add. Let's make it first. There, I can add the demo conference API, publish, and I say conf product, blah, and then I can just create it like this. Now I have the conference product and nothing more. So no user basically can use it yet. Just the administrator. I can go here. I can go to access control also, and I can add a group. I can say that guests can use it. That means that they do not need to sign in through the portal. They can use it. They can see the API directly in the portal without signing in. Or I can say it's only visible for developers in the portal, in the developer portal. That means they can select it and then subscribe to it. But at this point, let's just make this for fun. But at this point, I do not really have relation to or a subscription yet. So what we need to do is first we need to have a user. I have of course my default user, but if I add just a user, I can sign up through the developer portal, or I can do it manually here if I want to. So let's just make an example here and max at max.no max, and then I have just a random password. Then I can create it, create the user. Now I have the user and I have a product and I have an API. What I need now is a subscription, which ties the user and the product together. That means I look for subscription now here. And here I can add the new subscription. You see, I already have one for the administrator only. It gets created automatically. But now I want to have for this specific user, because this specific MaxVex user is allowed to use my conference product, nobody else. I can say MaxVex subscription, display name, I don't need. I can say all APIs or a specific API or product. In VIPs, we only use products, and we think it's easier to just handle products than having subscription for APIs, specific APIs, and products or all APIs. It really gets messy over time because the teams or somebody has to maintain this as well. And those people really don't know the APIs and the users necessarily. So it's a kind of, that's why we just say only products. And then you can, I use this conference product here. I use my MaxVex user, and I can create the subscription for him. So now I have my MaxVex here, the subscription, and I can show and hide the subscription here, which you do not see now. It's I think it's my Azure mask, which makes it away. But here's the subscription key that you see and that you can use then. If a user does this through the developer portal, he gets, of course, the email with the subscription key and everything he needs. It's a usual onboarding process where you sign up and then select your subscription or select the product that you want to use, and then you get your subscription, everything automated through the developer portal. But if you want to do it manually as an administrator, you can do it here as well. And if we go, for example, then back to the APIs here, let's say the demo conference API, and choose get topics here, and we test this through this portal, I can now select the product here and send it from here. And then I can use, of course, this default subscription key, or I can set a separate header here where I set this this subscription key. Where is it? There, the OCP APIM's subscription key, and then I can put it here. And you can do this with curl as well. So this subscription key is a long name, and every hacker may know about this name. So you can of course change it as well under the settings. We do this, and instead of OCP APIM session, you might call it I don't know, APIM key or your company name key or whatever you want. So there you're totally free. Another concept is versions. So you might have different versions of your APIM, or you have different revisions. So whenever you make a breaking change, basically, you can create a new version of your API. If you do not have a breaking change, but maybe you're adding a parameter to a query, you can work with revisions. And the way you do this is, let's make this away. You can go to revisions here and add a new revision here, and give it a description. Or you can say a new version of this, maybe a version 2, and you can make this path-based or put it in the header or as a query string, where you then basically say that where the URL basically changes because of that, which is very, very nice and handy. This is something that we actually in Vips do not use, basically because it's Azure API Management is for many really still a black box, and I do not recommend that people use it out of the box if they do not know Azure API Management so well. So you really should abstract those things away with pipelines and use the PowerShell module, for example, for that. So everything that you can see here, you can use with PowerShell as well. Yeah, maybe we have some more questions before we go into policies. Bram or Daniel?
At this time, let me check. So there was one question from the last part. Let me put it in screen. Which is the best approach to promote the API from a lower APIM env to production in a DevOpsy way? Is that something that you will touch on later on?
API from lower APIM. You mean if you have?
So I have a dev APIM and I want to promote it to the production APIM, just like we do with the backend software, right?
So what we do to deploy APIs is to use PowerShell basically. So there is the same way as you can import in the Azure portal an API, you can use a command Azure import API. Azure API Management, Azure API Management import API, something like that. You can just run the command and then you have the API applied. And that's really what we do. We just have a script which is so large to add an API, and we have it as a pipeline. But I will touch on this a bit later, because we have integrated this with the pipeline template, which works quite great. But everything is automated through pipelines, basically, at our place, so that people really just have to use a template, a pipeline template, and have a path to where their file basically is, and then it just is added there. And if it works in the test environment, then you run basically the same pipeline again towards another environment, the production environment. So we do not go from a test environment, test APIM, and take the API from there and then put it into another APIM. That's what we do not do. But you can do it, of course.
All right. So for now, that seems to be the only question. So if there are any other questions, please put them in the chat. Then I will make sure to ask them to Sven. And for your information, we're now running 1 hour.
Yeah. So let's talk about the policies and named values, because as I said,
I've put your slides in stream, and I will leave you again.
Yeah. So policies basically code. It's XML code. And iPolicy has 4 sections. It has an inbound, backend, outbound, and on arrow. So whenever a call is coming in to Azure API Management, it hits the inbound section, where you can have code, and you can do with the request whatever you want. You can add headers, you can remove headers, you can check headers, you can convert stuff, whatever you want. Then you have the backend section, where you basically set where the request is going to. So let's say that like now the conference API has a backend saying that the backend is somewhere in another Azure tenant, but now you're implementing your own conference API, and then you can change it in the backend section, basically, so that the request is going to your own service, backend service. When the backend or the request comes back from the service, it gets into the outbound section, where you also can do stuff. You can add stuff, remove stuff. It's very handy, for example, if there are some information added which are backend specific. Maybe there are some URLs or some kind of information in the request that you would like not to show to the client, then you can remove it there, for example. Or if it's a legacy application, just giving you XML code, you can, in the outbound section, then transform it to JSON, for example. So stuff like that you can do. And then there's an on arrow section. So when, for example, the backend is not getting back because it hangs, then you can it will go into an arrow section, and then you can apply some nice message, service unavailable, or whatever you want. Let's first take a look at this. So we go into design here. I cannot make it smaller, sorry, but here we have here we have the backend section where you can change it. You can override it here, and if you have another place where your conference APIs, you can just change this. Let me go back here. If you click here, you see the entire policy as code. And now it gets a bit interesting. As I said, it's XML code, but I said you can code it. You can actually code it in C#. which is kind of weird. So you have XML code together with C#, which really nobody can maintain over time, but it's something. It's a really weak point, I think, in Azure API Management, that you have XML together with C#. But it's something that that APIM, the developers say it's they bought the service some years ago, and it's how it is, and there are no plans to ever change this. However, here's the inbound section, backend, outbound, and on arrow section, and then you have base here, which means whenever you have something in another scope, it will be integrated here. Let's take a look. We have a global policy which applies to all APIs and everything, basically. So every request goes through or hits the global policy. And then we have the product policies, we have APIs and operation policies. So let's say that I am here in Get Topics. And here I have my policy. And now I would like to add something. Let's pick the snippets here to make it a bit easy. And let's say I have a limit call rate per key, like here. Rate limit keys calls, I say 5 calls within 10 seconds. And the counter could be an IP address. I have an example in my notes, but it's really just XML code or predefined policies that you can use. But you can use C# as well here. So let's say that let's make a very easy one here. Restrict caller APIs, and I can. I have no example right now, but let's make it this like here, and then you can. This is the operation API here, and then we can save. Great. Now we have a policy here, and then we can go on this level where we have the API policy here for all APIs, so that all operations. So for the entire API, we can put something here as well. Let's just make a comment here. Hello API. Like this, and then we can have save. And now we can go to products as well. Where are products? There on for the conference here, and we can say policy, and then we can do the same here. Product hello, like this, and then we can do it for all APIs, so on the global level as well, like this. Sorry. Global. And like this. Inbound, like this. No, sorry, that was wrong. Like this. So the question is, if you have a lot of code in all of those policies, because you would like to validate for this operation, but you would maybe make sure that the product is not used for different APIs, for example, different IP addresses, for example, and then you apply also on the global level maybe some logging information, stuff like that. So how do you know how the entire or the effective policy would look like? Because this is something, this is very important to understand how the entire code would look like, and you can do this by using this calculate effective policy here. Since we are using a product, we can select the conference, and here you then get the entire policy then. So in this example, I filter the address range, and then comes here from the API, and then from the product, and then also the code for the global. And why is this so? This is so because I set base here. If I would remove this one here and say save, let me just double check here. There's no base at this point here, and do the same again for the conference. I just would see the IP filtering, but not my hello and my global and so on, because it's not included at this point. This is really because this base says, where do I put the upper scope? Like here, I'm on operational level, and I say base. Okay, base means here comes the policy code for APIs. And the same is true for product and global. And the thing is, what makes it a bit complicated is you can put in base here, or you can put it here, or whatever you want. So you're quite flexible, but it also gets super, super messy over time. So there was one question, how do I secure my applications, basically, my backend applications? And yeah, you have code, C# code, and all the stuff you need in API and all the information, and you can do authorization and so on, do there. And you can put it in on the global level or on the product level, and then you can put in logging as well. But what we have done at VIPS at the start was include a lot of code in all the policies, and those policies are 2,000 lines, and this is something that nobody can really maintain anymore, because you have this here, this XML code, but you can also do, sorry, there, this one here, and then you can have basically ordinary C# code here. It supports .NET Core, but not everything in .NET Core, but most of the stuff. But there are some exceptions of that. But the code can get really, really messy over time. So what we do at VIPS is to make them as minimal as possible, and that's also something that the Microsoft APIM people say, that put not so much into it, because it's hard to maintain. Yes. So the subscription keys, we talked about subscription keys already. There's a master subscription key. Don't use it. Just forget about it. Effective policies, and then we have named values as well. I just have to. No, it's not there. Okay, no problem. Oops, that was bad. What's that here? Okay, secrets and named values, basically. Let's have a look at named values. I can change. I can have the code somewhere else. Basically, I can say that I would have an IP address at this place here, and then I can put them somewhere else. Okay, I cannot have it at this place. Let me just do this. I'm struggling at just one screen. I'm just struggling to find basically my notes for this here. Just there. Okay, I have it there. That's fine as well. So when I, for example, say I set the backend service with an address, I could say I would like to have a placeholder for that. And the way I do this, I go into the named value section of Azure API Management. Let me just, there it is. Here I have named values, and then I can add a name here, like AKS URL, for example, and then I can put in the IP address here, for example, and then I can use it. What I also can say, I can use a secret here, so it's not visible then, or I can get it from a key vault as well. So I can select it here, and then I can connect it. Yes, I see it's almost over an hour. Daniel, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Are there any questions? I need somebody else maybe to talk a bit at least.
Yeah, sure. We do have a question. So Jaco is asking if you restrict the access to an API by specifying the allowed IP address range in policy, but is this API still publicly visible?
Yeah. Also
Let me get a look.
this is just the policy. So it's of course totally publicly available, and if you have it publicly available, everybody can see it. But and those restricted AP addresses also can send requests, but the policy just denies them their requests. But of course, you can. I'm not a hacker, but hackers are very creative. That they probably can do a lot of stuff anyway. So that's why it might make really sense to put it into a VNet. But there's a networking session network section that where we will explain this a bit more in detail.
And that was the only question that came in. So once again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate, put them in the chat, let me know, and I will make sure that you get answered by Sven.
Can you?
There's none coming in.
Okay, if you can just show. Great, I just go in here.
Okay, I will drop out again.
Yeah. Okay, then repository. So where do you keep the APIs? And I said in the beginning that you can have it as a monolith, and all your APIs in one repository. And that's what we did basically. We had an external repository where we kept all those APIs. And we had a team, or basically one person, that was responsible for this. But this is really hard for this person because he has to do everything for those teams. And then we saw later I didn't notice, but later noticed, okay, there's Git already integrated into Azure API Management as well. So I looked at this. Let me just show it to you. Have to find it. Repository there. So you get the repository URL. You see the commit. You can save changes that you make in the portal. You can change. You can save them in this repository. You can make changes and then deploy it also, or you can make it use the REST API and then commit it to there and deploy it. So you have it integrated, but I think it doesn't really work for us because you have still people that do changes in teams that do changes in the instance in the portal directly. Somebody does it via REST, and sometimes they save it to the repository, sometimes not, and it really gets out of sync very, very soon, and it really is a problem. So I think the best case is to have it externally with pull requests and stuff like that. But this doesn't really work either. So what we found out really is that we do not have a repository at all for it. So there's no repository for APIs. The Swagger files and the API and operation policies, those artifacts should be part of the application. So if you have a payment application, there you should have your payment Swagger file. You have it anyway there, but you shouldn't duplicate it and have it another place. You should it only have there. And the same is true for the API policies and all the policies for the operations, if you have one. You don't need to have policies, but if you have, you should keep them together. And then you have the product policies. The product sometimes contain a lot of APIs from different teams, maybe. So the question then is, who's responsible for the product policies? Is it one team, or is it the people that maintain Azure API Management? And that's something where we struggle a bit. Right now, it's us, the API Management, people that administrate it. But to be honest, we don't know anything about those products and APIs and those policies because we don't develop them. It's the teams that develop those policies, also for the products. So ideally, a team should be responsible for product, or two teams that work well together and where they have a shared repository for those APIM product stuff. But when it comes to the global policy, that should be maintained maybe by the administrators of Azure API Management, because this global policies really affects everybody. What we, for example, have at VIPS, we are working on that right now. We have 2 AKS clusters. One is active, and when we want to upgrade this, we spin up a new AKS cluster and then just switch over the traffic. And we do this in Azure API Management, where we just in the global policy say that the backend service, the URL, the AKS URL is just a different one. So we just change it in Azure API Management. And we're not quite there yet, but it's something that we look into it. You can do it with other services as well, with API Gateway, for example, or the App Gateway, sorry, or in Azure API Management. The good thing about Azure API Management is that it's really easy. You just make a change in the policy, which is a named value, basically. So it's just updating a named value. But the problem maybe is that Azure API Management is still for many a black box, and people that know or want to make changes there has really to understand Azure API Management. And App Gateway is more a service that many are familiar with, but it introduces one led more, or a bit more complexity. Yeah, that's basically what I said. You have two APIs, and then what we did first is have one central API, but now we do it separately here. So a product deployment at our place looks like this. You can adding an API to a product is just one command. Add API to product. It's an Azure PowerShell command that you can apply. But this is based on a JSON file that we have. We have a JSON file for a product, which basically is just a list of the APIs which are within this product. And when I want to deploy or add an API or remove an API from a product, I just read this JSON file, or the script reads this JSON file and then adds or removes an API. I told you in the beginning that, or a bit earlier, how we do basically deployments. In this case, a product deployment. We have a YAML file, and we say where the repository for this is, and then we set a variable, which is here the product ID, and then we define some steps like checkout, check out the APIM tools, which is just containing a script to deploy, also add and remove APIs, and then a template. And this template is then the APIM product template, which I can't unfortunately show here. But it's just running a command, basically add API to product or remove API to product. Very simple. So what is the easiest way to develop a policy? I showed you that you can use the Azure portal for this, but you saw this tiny little window, and this might be a bit hard, and it's not very fun. So, but there's an extension which works quite great. Let me just find Visual Studio here. Visual Studio has an extension which is called Azure API Management that you can download and install. You have, of course, to be signed in there. And then you get an overview of all your APIs. For example, the Azure API Management instance that we provision, or that I provisioned in the beginning. And I see here my demo conference. I see the policies for that. And if we take this policy for get topics again, then we see this here, the policy, and I can change it, and I save, and then it gets automatically uploaded there. What I also can do, I can right-click and I can test it, or I can debug a policy here as well, quite easily. And this works quite okay. Personally, I tend to still use Postman or the curl commands from my terminal, but this would probably work as fine as well. But I haven't used it so much. Okay, maybe there are some questions regarding this, Bram or Daniel?
There actually are. So let me zoom in on a few. We did answer that one. So the first question is from Raymond, and he is asking if you can give a real-world example of a transaction out of the VIPS app I'm not sure if that's possible, but
a real example of a VIPS app. Yeah, so we have, for example, a login backend service that you call via Azure API Management, and then there's some token back and forth that you then can use to call a real API basically with this token, and then you get to the payment backend service, for example. Is this something? But we are using really a login backend service for this to make this happen. Then we are not using only Azure API Management for this.
okay. Then this is something I'm not sure where this is going about. Repeat the directives globally. I think that has to do with the code that you were typing. I'm not totally sure.
I'm sure as well.
Then there's actually a question on how
let's take this because I want to show something about networking after that.
Okay.
Maybe we spare this for the next slide, because then we talk about networking with internal networking, external, and stuff like that.
Okay. The answer will follow in the upcoming slides.
Okay. Then let me share the screen again here. Do you see it?
Yep, it's back in screen, and I will leave you to it.
Okay. Like now, here's the instance of Azure API Management, and I have the developer pricing tier, which means I have VNet integration. As I said, I only have it for the developer portal or for developer tier and the premium pricing tier, not for the others. So when I go to networking here, virtual networking, I can say none, external or internal. Right now, I have none, so it's not in a virtual network, so it's totally open to the public internet. But I can change that whenever I want. So in this case, I have internal VNet, and that's how. So this is a basic drawing here, just to understand it. I have my Azure API Management here in a separate subnet, and I can access it only if I have. I can only use the private IP address, basically, nothing more. I have a private IP address. I can use it inside the VNet and not outside. So that means if I'm inside the VNet here, I have VM2, and I can use this your APM internal Azure API Management conf session to access all the IP address directly. If I want to integrate it with a separate VNet, you might know I have to peer it first, and then I can use the internal IP address as well. So there's no external IP address. But if I want to make it accessible anyway, I have to have something else, like application gateway, the green icon here. The green icon, the app gateway sits in another subnet or into another VNet, which I then peer. But this can access API management with its private IP address, basically. And Azure App Gateway has web application firewall that I can use as some kind of security. So my users would then send requests to this app gateway, and the requests would go then from there to app gateway to APIM. If I have internal users, my internal users can of course peer with this APIM management network and then call APIM directly. That's also why or how we do it. From the management perspective, you can still access this directly. This might answer your question with this app gateway. Yes. If you have an external VNet, you have a public IP address, but you also have a VNet integration. That means that you can, of course, put the network security group in your subnet and close it totally, but you still have your public IP address, but it wouldn't make sense. So this is, for example, useful if you have, for example, I've not. Let me. There are some certain. We have a use case, for example, where we need a public IP address. We would like to not have app gateway, but we would like to have front door. Now I have an example for front door with no VNet because it's also a public IP address. So let's just assume we have a public IP address and we have no VNet, or we have a VNet. If we have a VNet, we just open with no network security rule in place, which is basically almost the same, security-wise at least. So let's say you would like to use front door. A front door requires you to have a public backend IP address. So you cannot have front door in front of an internal integrated APIM. So yeah, it has to have a public IP address. So what we would do then, we would restrict API management with policies to just the IP addresses that are coming from Azure Front Door, but there's also a certain header from this Azure Front Door instance that you have that we would also check in the policy, in the global policy. That way you can have an open API management instance, but only accessible from one specific Azure service, like this Azure Front Door. So sometimes it's required to have a public IP address. You cannot put it always into internal VNet. And you might not want this because it's super expensive. You have to have this premium pricing tier in production, and this costs a lot of money. So that's why standard or basic might also work, but then public available, of course, on the internet, but you can restrict it quite good. Personally, I must say I have no experience with this. I know that some people are doing this, but we like to pay money. Then, are there more questions to this? Maybe Daniel.
Well, there's one from Bart who asks, does the app gateway allow you to do web application firewalls?
The app gateway, yes.
Wait, yeah. But how about APIM? So
no, APIM has not such things. But you can the only what you can do is you can validate the request basically, you can, but it has no web application firewall itself. So you have to use it from app gateway.
Okay, so the problem that Bart is stating is that it doesn't work well with a large JSON set. So APIM itself doesn't handle web application firewall. That is done by the app gateway.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So if you have a very large set of rules for your web application firewall, then that might be an issue.
Yes, and it basically is an issue at our place. So we have
Okay.
100 APIs, roughly, maybe a bit more. And what web application firewall rules you really use? I mean, you basically have to put in many rules, and at the end you're basically open again. So that's why we working on having firewalls basically as close to the application as possible. So I think API management is not so great at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good answer, I think.
So that's why you have to. We started by having all the APIs in one instance, but now we are looking at splitting a bit up to have API management instance for this, for internal and for external, basically. So, but yeah, you could make everything happen with policies, but then you have to write a lot of policies and making errors anyway. So.
All right. And then I see one other question that hops into your previous part. If you can debug the policies in VS Code. And I thought that you said you could, right?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, yeah.
You can debug them. You can basically right click here. No, sorry. Where was it? There was a.
Yeah, there. Start the debugging.
Debugging, yes. And then you can
great.
Do it, and yeah, and then you can send a request, and you have to set a breakpoint first. But there you have it, and then you have a lot of information here.
Cool.
And then you can, if you have one more policy snippet here, you can have another breakpoint and stuff like that. And then you can use those icons here to move back and forth, or forth at least, and inside and so on.
Yeah, cool. All right. Just a heads up, we'll be looking at 20 minutes left or so.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
So just very shortly, maybe gateways. I thought we have managed gateways or one managed gateways, which is their default. But sometimes you want to ensure that the or your traffic is within your let's say AKS environment, or if you have on-prem, you don't want to go outside. So a managed API gateway wouldn't work at this place, because all the API consumers would need to first call the API management gateway or your instance, and from there it's going out. So the request is flowing basically in and out and in and so on. So, but what you can do is you can deploy self-hosted API gateways. And your API consumers can then call the self-hosted API gateways that are running maybe at the same place at your backend services. So what you still would need is a connection from your place where the self-hosted API gateway is to your API management instance on I think port 8443 or 443. I'm not sure, but there is there has to be a connection, because whenever you make a change in Azure API Management, let's say you are removing an API from a gateway, or you make a change in a policy, or you want to look at the health or the metrics and so on. All those stuff goes via this connection, this connectivity between the API gateway host and your instance. But the traffic won't leave. It's just more the configuration and the management traffic that goes between the self-hosted gateway and your instance. Can take a look here at the gateways. I have no gateway right now. I just can have a sample gateway. I have to give it a location. I guess I can write something. It's just this location. I'm not sure why this is required, but it's needed for, it's just meta information that might be interesting. But it's not used for anything special. Let me just do it again. Just add here, and I have my gateway. I say Oslo, and then I add this demo conference, for example, and I can say add. And I can open it. And what I get here is deployment, sorry. I can get for Docker or something. Now this is not visible. Let me just copy this out and go in here like this. And you see basically this is just a Docker command, which is run as a daemon, and a port mapping here, and 443, give it a name and an environment file, which we will look at. And then it downloads basically the image for that. And that I can run. And then I can use this as my API gateway and deploy wherever I want, basically. And the same code is also, or the code is also available for Kubernetes out of the box. For Docker, I have to have this environment configuration. So basically where the endpoint of my Azure API Management instance really is, because they have to communicate still, exchanging metrics and API configurations. Now I added one API, but maybe next week or so I also want to add this one here, and now I have two APIs, and immediately now this change would apply also in the gateway, in the Docker, or in the gateway, which I deployed maybe in my AKS setup. Yes, that was basically it. Very relatively fast walkthrough. Bram?
I'm putting Bram also back online. Hey Bram, you're also on. So there's one question that came up in the last part, and that is the question: is there an alternative for the premium version of APIM?
Yeah, also you have basic and standard as well, but they have no premium. They have some SLA change or differences, and but if you want VNet integration, you need premium or developer. But developer you just have one unit. I guess if you have some more spikes or some more traffic, you need might need up to 4 units, capacity units, and you can't have this with the developer tier. So you need the premium tier. I think that standard and basic tier, they go up to 2. I'm not 100% sure. But there is standard and basic as well, and consumption, which might work as well if you don't need VNet integration and stuff like that. But it's more a shared service then.
Yeah. Okay. So what a extremely big session.
Yeah,
I got so much information that I have to rewatch this session in order to get everything into my brain.
Yeah, that was very much. I haven't shown so much code, or basically no code, but but everything what I showed in the portal, you can do everything in the with PowerShell as well, or with REST. I know there are SDKs for Python, Java, I guess as well. Not sure, 100% sure, or .NET at least. So yeah, but most of the stuff you can also do with the portal. When it comes to logging, there's something interesting also, logging from Azure API Management to Event Hub, for example. There you need some PowerShell at least. So you can't do everything in the portal.
Okay. To the people in the stream, do you have any questions for Sven left? This is the time to ask them. We did ask the chat if they would love to see an in-depth session on a specific part of the API management tooling, but we did not get a response back yet. But I think it might be interested to have some sort of deep dive session in a specific area, in a few sessions maybe. And Patrick says thank you for the walkthrough, and it connected some dots for him. Glenn also learned a lot, so thanks. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
And on request from Floor, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel, please, and stay tuned for new meetups.
Yeah, we will have another one that is coming up. We are looking to the format that we will do that in. It might be online, it might be hybrid. We will keep you informed on our meetup page. Bram can share some details about the session already.
How about the next session for our meetup?
Yeah.
That will be about container security. I don't have just one sec. When did we plan it again? Do you know that by heart, Daniel?
Yeah, it's on the October the 27th. It's on a Wednesday.
Yeah. And Sjoukje will be talking about best practices for securing your Azure container services. So a really cool meetup as well. So hope to see you guys there.
There's one question.
Right.
One question about the APIM implementation. If you could reuse, or is it?
I think reuse.
Yeah.
You can't use Terraform, yes, but I think you cannot use Terraform. I'm not sure. A year ago, you couldn't use Terraform to deploy with the consumption, but maybe it's maybe someone created a pull request for that. I'm not sure.
Okay, so I also know you can use it with Terraform. I don't exactly know the delimitation, so that is something that you should look into if you want to use Terraform. All right.
You can at least administrate it with Terraform, but adding APIs and stuff you can probably do as well. But yeah, I'm not. I have no experience with that.
Okay, Sven, I would like to thank you so much for your session tonight. Thank you that you would have been were the first with our new team to do this first online meetup with the Go Azure meetup group, and hopefully in some time in the near future we can come and do an in real life session. And what was it? You
Sweden.
told me in the beginning, Sweden. Yeah.
I'm Sweden.
I'm in Oslo. I'm in Norway.
Oh, sorry.
In Norway, you see. That was why I was afraid of it. Yeah. All right. So thank you so much. Thanks everyone for watching. This is the end of a great meetup. In the chat, you will find our next meetup. Subscribe to our channel and like this broadcast. You will help us a lot in spreading the information about API management.
Yes.
Thank you
very
all,
much
and
for
bye-bye.
having me. Bye-bye.